Okay, I might as well go ahead and get into this right now. Axo, you seem super excited about no more 3D printed slop and all that. And look, I'll first go ahead and say I am a 3D printer enjoyer. I am. I use a lot of 3D printed stuff. This is a 3D printed dice container that has multiple sets of dice for playing games. Obviously, those of you who've been around a bit know about the 3D printed Suris that I have anytime I have new filament that I'm trying to do. I have a 3D printed speed loader for my 9mm. I have a 3D printed bunch of shit. I just have it lying around me. Here's another 3D printed dice container. Nice, heavy, thunky one right here. And whenever I'm using my 3D printer, oftentimes I am building things to fix areas of my house. I've got right behind me, I've got a light switch that I can't reach because it's behind the china cabinet. The wall is literally just sized exactly enough to where I would not be able to have the china cabinet behind me and get to the fixture at all and get to the actual light switch. But what I can do very easily is just print out a lever system, and that's what I have for like every single one of these instances where it's the fridge or what have you. I'm throwing all this out there to show this is a thing that I enjoy. Hell, my Flash Forge is right next to me with a failed 3D print on it that I have yet to clean up from it. I guess I might as well do that right now. And this was supposed to be a box that I was handing off to another person that was supposed to be in his rigid toolbox for Magic the Gathering stuff. But unfortunately, the filament decided it didn't want to go. It's just a thing that happens sometimes. For that one, I think it said it ran out and it didn't give me the notification that filament was out. What Axo's talking about are the Wiggle Dragons. And now I actually do like the Wiggle Dragons, but I actually have two of them printed out that I actively play with for fun that are like on display over in my living room. And then I've got some small ones that I have like sitting in a Pokeball because I think it's funny to have one of those shitty things coming out of a Pokeball. Anyway, the conversation about 3D printed slop being at a convention is one conversation. And I do not think that 3D printed slop needs to be at a convention. I think that most of the things that you have at a convention, at a maker's market, should be things that a person has made, not things that have been ran off of a printer. Ignoring all of the idiosyncrasies that go into getting a good 3D print, because it's not that easy sometimes to get your stuff dialed in, I do think that that is something that needs to be handled far better than how we currently do it. What we're talking about today is not that. Though, I do want to ask, if you're new here, maybe consider subscribing to the channel, maybe consider following over on Twitch, maybe checking out my secondary channels where I talk about Magic the Gathering, where I talk about more news-related stuff. This one going up on the main channel because, quite frankly, it's a thing that I care about a lot. Now, I was made aware of this because, again, I watch a lot of 3D printed stuff. My algorithm shows me that. So I saw this video from 3D Print Rancher, and I wanted to dismiss the video because I've seen so many times where a government bill is introduced and people think it's going to be the end of the world in one way, shape, or form, and then he actually started articulating what the bill goes over and why. Let's go over the bill itself so that we are not just aping on somebody else's work. We need to figure out what is going on here, because this does affect, if you do 3D printing, this affects you, this affects me, this affects a lot of us, but it's gonna sound like a good thing at first. Aether88 says there is some buzzing in your microphone. Is there? I'm not aware of that. Okay. Jasso says, are other states thinking of enacting this? Because this is just Washington. So a thing to note about every bit of legislation ever. Do you remember when the Don't Say Gay bill was introduced only in Florida? And it's only in Florida was a talking point on the right, and then we got like 11 other bills that used the exact same verbiage afterwards because it was allowed to pass. When a bill is introduced in a state, it does not stay geographically landlocked to that state all the time. When bills like this are introduced, It is our job to lobby against them, or I'm going to try to convince you to lobby against it. I don't know if I'll succeed. It's our job to lobby against it so that it fails in its home state, so that the likelihood of it being attempted in another state and potentially spreading and even getting up to the federal level, it stops that. Elsewise, you get the Florida Don't Say Gay ban that ends up spreading to multiple other school systems. Undead Rodnars, I just came in. What did I miss? What are they banning specifically of 3D printing? That's what we're getting into. That's what we're getting into. So, let's go ahead and read the bill. An act relating to preventing the unlawful manufacturing of firearms by requiring 3D printers be equipped with certain blocking technologies, adding a new chapter to Title 19 RCW and prescribing penalties. Now, those of you who know, who've been on my channel know enough, know that I'm fairly pro-gun. I am a very, very hard advocate that the further left you go, the more guns you get back. There is a 3D printed type. Naki Bree says, I smell unenforceable. No, not at all. We're going to keep reading, but not unenforceable. That's why it's scary. So, the bill ostensibly is attempting to make the case that we should put a bit of spyware, effectively, on every 3D printer that is ever manufactured, and install that spyware as a patch on 3D printers that have already been manufactured. So, for instance, I have a FlashForge printer. FlashForge printers are the ones that primarily got used for this. They are the company that specifically got targeted in this initially, and now this is hopefully being, they're hoping to spread it to Bamboo and Ender and everyone else. Twilight says, flock in your house. Okay. So the goal of this would be to have a bit of spyware on your system that if you were to print something that is deemed wrong, that is deemed enforceably incorrect by whomever gets to decide this, then that would be stopped. You would you would have one of two situations. Either the item would be printed and then you would be put on a list and then some legal correspondence would be sent to you, or alternatively, it would just be blocked. Your 3D printer would be like, I cannot print this, I legally cannot print this, whatever the fuck. Despite the fact that if you are a 3D modeler and you just make something, it's suddenly you've just made an illegal thing. It's weird. So what is that? It's a giant bit of government surveillance. And I'm going to be honest, I am not okay with that. When I was a kid, I wasn't okay with the fucking Patriot Act. And now that we're sitting here in 2026 with the Trump regime, and then even when we get a Democrat in office, they are only mildly better. They don't end up actually moving the needle far enough to fix a lot of the broken shit in America. I don't trust those people to have spyware on my machine. Now, granted, they already have spyware on my computer, on my phone, on my fucking Amazon Alexa. They have it in enough places already. They don't need yet another fucking place. They don't. The goal of the bill is to prevent people from printing ghost guns. Now, if you don't know what a ghost gun is simply a firearm that, for one reason or another, does not exist in the United States database of firearms that people have. Now, I am an advocate for firearms to be registered. I am. But I am not an advocate for an invasion of people's privacy, which this is. So I get a little bit cockeyed here, because on the one hand, when I bought my 9mm, I had to go and register in order to get that firearm. But I know that there are ways to get firearms where you don't register them, and that can be a huge fucking problem. But sometimes the way that you get them without being registered is literally just like a grandpa handing you something as an heirloom. Like, I have a .22 rifle from my grandpa when he died. Like, that's to just have that. Anyway, Naki Bree says you can't photocopy money because it's all the same, and it has the your union thing, and it's made from a single source. What is... What is the photocopy? Oh, I'm saying unenforceable because you can't stop someone from modeling a gun themselves. Right, you can't stop somebody from modeling a gun themselves. You can't stop somebody from going to Home Depot and buying a couple of pipes and just putting a hammer and primer on the pipes and just making a homemade shotgun. You've got plenty of ways where that can happen. So, let's go ahead and get into more of the bill. Section 1. The definitions of this section apply throughout the chapter unless the context clearly requires otherwise. This is... You can go back and read all of this stuff if you really want to. This is your standard legalese. We need to do the definitions of things. If I feel like a definition of something isn't clear, then I can go back and I can read it again. Section 2, this chapter applies to persons that conduct business in Washington or produce products or services that are sold or otherwise transferred to residents of Washington. So, as an example, if this bill passes for Washington, if there is a micro center in Washington getting Bamboo Labs printers or Ender printers, the company is not just going to say, well, Washington has a special rule, so we have to specially apply firmware to the printers that we sell specifically to Washington. No, they're going to put it as a blanket thing on all of their printers because that is simpler than trying to track which ones are individually going to different areas in warehouses, especially when you start getting into, like, Amazon. Section 3. After July 1st, 2027, no person or manufacturers, wholesale, or sells any 3D printers may sell or otherwise transfer for consideration a 3D printer in this state unless the 3D printer is equipped with blocking features that prevent the printer from printing firearms and illegal firearms parts, and the manufacturer of the printer has attested to the integration of blocking features pursuant to subsection 2 of this section. Blocking features must meet or exceed the standards provided in sections 6 and 7 of this act and any rules and regulations adopted under those sections. To comply with the attestation requirement of subsection 1 of the section, before selling or otherwise transferring for consideration a 3D printer, the manufacturer must submit to the Attorney General an attestation under penalty of perjury that the manufacturer has equipped all of the models of their 3D printer sold or transferred in this state with those blocking features that meet or exceed the blocking feature standards provided in Section 6 and 7 of the Act. Okay, so let's go to Section 6 or 7 real quick to see exactly what these blocking features do and see why. Section 6, for the purpose of this chapter, a software controls, process, satisfies the blocking feature requirement only if it effectively rejects print requests for firearms or illegal firearms parts with a high degree of reliability, and if it prevents a user with significant technical skill from bypassing a digital firearm manufacturing code detection algorithm and thereby subverting the software controls process. So, it's just within a reasonable amount is what it's trying to argue there. It gets the average person who might just think to 3D print a gun. It stops the average person from being able to 3D print. That's what it's trying to do. Number 2, a software controls process may be integrated into 3D printers functions in any of the following design forms. You can do it via firmware, you can do it via an integrated preprint software design, or, and this is the one that scares me a little bit, a handshake authentication sign. Now let's read through this one. There's a reason why this one concerns me. Limitation of a three-dimensional printer's operation to accept geometric code for printing only from specified slicers or other preprint software wherein the printer will require digital watermark or other authentication tool verifying the identity of the preprint software. This means that if you are using an open source slicer, right now, for those who don't know, when you are printing, here, let me go ahead and show you so that you know what this is, because for some of you, you might not know what a slicer is. And that's entirely okay. I don't think you should have to know what a slicer is if you are not in the 3D printed space. That is fine. So here is my folder of all of my 3D printed shit. Here is the dice holder that you saw in my hands right here. So this dice holder right here is from this 3D model. This is not a 3D modeling software. This is what is called a slicer software. It is called a slicer because the way a 3D print is made, The way it is created is it is made with hundreds, sometimes thousands, of these individual 3D layers. The slicer determines where and when those layers need to be applied so that it can literally make your 3D print as if it is firing out a tube of toothpaste. This is how a 3D printer operates. It is why slicer software is called slicer software. A 3D printer cannot print an object unless slicing software has first cut up the 3D print into a bunch of individual layers so that the printer knows what the fuck it's doing. Otherwise, it sees a giant block and it has no idea what to do with that giant block. It has nothing to do. Also, I have a cat. So I guess we're going to take a quick break for just a second. So I can bring Cutie Pie up here. Hi there. How are you doing? How are you? Are you going to give me an allergic reaction like Chip did yesterday? Is that what your plan is? Jessa says, oh boy, this is messy. Like, I know what it's saying, and there's so much that can go wrong. Basically, yes, it is a hefty kitty. All of Saki's kitties are quite large. Well, I say all of. There are two of them. What is your plan? What is your plan, Fatso? Come here. Yeah? Is that what you wanted? You just want some attention? A theory says that dice holder could run afoul from the law. It depends on how that software is implemented. So, okay, hop down. So, now that you know why a slicer does what it does, now you know why a slicer works the way it works, you know what that language means. Because, again, I'm not going to assume that if you're not into 3D printing, that you automatically know what that means. Okay. Only if that preprint software has integrated a firearms blueprint detection algorithm qualified by the Attorney General under subsection 4 of this section, such that any stereo, a lithography file, or other computer-aided design file must be screened by the algorithm before the software will proceed to produce geometric code, and such that software will not produce the geometric code for files that are identified by the algorithm as directing the printer to print firearms or illegal parts. So basically, yeah, one, no more cosplay guns, because you could 3D print a cosplay gun, like you're trying to cosplay Joker or something, Joker from Persona, he uses guns. And you can't do that cosplay anymore because that particular gun that you wanted to 3D print because you wanted a character-accurate model that cannot fire anything could be hit there. Only because the software sees... God, I love my cats. Sorry. Apologies. Ugh. I love my animals. My animals give me allergic reactions when I don't clean my face off after having my animals touch me. So if you want a lore-accurate character firearm that isn't actually a firearm, it's basically just a block of fucking plastic, because the way this software is going to work is this is going to use the same thing as a large language model. It's going to use a large language model to scan through a database and go, oh my god, that gun looks like a gun, even if it's not actually one. It looks kind of like a blueprint of a thing that kind of sort of was a gun or is a gun. Don't let them 3D print that. Don't let them do that. Subnark says, if the prop is filled on the inside, would that be good enough to convince it it's safe? Here's the thing. I don't know. I don't know. My problem is that when you have this handshake authentication design, your 3D printers now have to always be online. Always. That cat is fighting. Ma'am. Ma'am. You are a box cat. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Have fun. I'm going to try to ignore all of your shenanigans as best I can. Yeah, all cats are box cats. I understand. I understand. Is that like a box turtle? No, not quite. Okay, I can't actually ignore it. Child, I appreciate that this is what you find entertaining. I need you to cease. I need you to cease. Oh my god! Cease! Child! I'm trying to talk about thing. Fucking hell. Fucking hell. So, the reason that I have a problem with this is because this starts a trend. Cease, child. We are done. I will put it on top of my monitors to get it away from you. Jesus Christ. Melody says, don't talk about thing, only kitty. Exactly. Exactly. My problem with this is that even if this is being done for the best of intentions, it doesn't actually solve the problem of ghost guns. The issue with ghost guns is that they are not tracked guns. Eliminating one method, partially, of getting ghost guns on the market does not actually do a whole lot in the grand scheme of things for ghost guns. Most people who have ghost guns have a gun that has had the serial number shaved off. That is their ghost gun. That is what that is. Or it is a gun that was passed down to them from somebody and they never went and fucking registered it. Or they went to Home Depot and spent $15 and a stick of bubble gum and created the Shinzo Abe Deluxe. It doesn't actually solve the problem. Because a $300 to $500 machine that can make some of the parts that you then have to supplement with more metal parts to create a firearm versus spending $15 or $20 at the fucking Home Depot to just make the firearm. If your worry is criminals using bottom dollar to get firearms that are unregistered, the Home Depot is likely responsible for more of that. Honestly. Zeta says, oof, a zip gun? So it doesn't do a whole lot to address the actual problem that the bill seems to argue that it wants to address. But on top of that, once you start integrating this handshake authentication software, where it can analyze anything you're trying to 3D print and tell you, the end user, no, we want to invade your privacy and tell you that you are not responsible enough to print that thing. I don't give a shit who is in charge of the United States government at that time. I don't trust that person enough with that information. I don't. The people of the United States, since 2001, have been completely and totally just normalized to the idea of government surveillance on every aspect of their life. And it's a little tiring, because it hasn't actually made us any fucking safer. But if a 3D printer is able to invade your privacy and tell you that you are not allowed to print something, there was a point that was made in this guy's video that I had not considered. There was a point that I had not considered, and this is not, I'm letting you know right now, this is not my original idea. This is a point that I pulled from his video. What happens when you start that process of having a 3D printer be able to tell you, you cannot print this thing because it is illegal? It is an infringement on our currently expected laws for you to print this thing. I'm going to show you something from a company that is famous for trying to sue people into oblivion for their copyright. So if you want to believe, for instance, that this kind of stuff would not eventually go onto the chopping block, then you live in an actual alternate reality to the rest of us. Nintendo, Disney, Any major company that has an IP that they are known to protect with a vigilance such that they would destroy a person's life in order to maintain it, even when previous legal precedent has proven them wrong, as happened with Nintendo in multiple emulator disputes. If you do not believe that that company with that history, or any company with a similar history, would not use this as an opportunity to go, oh no, we don't want people making 3D printed stuff that looks kind of like the merch that we want to sell. We want them to stop doing that, and it's technically illegal, just like the firearms law. If you believe that they would not step in, your reality is an alternate to mine. I don't tend to print things that are copyright. I don't have much of a reason to. I have like a 3D printed TPU Vaporeon because I thought it would be funny to place that on a desk and like squish it every now and again. And then I found out that TPU and things that are that small don't really work out very well. K. Charles says, we see you printing a big sphere with 2 little spheres. Disney has been notified. That'll be $50,000. My worry is that when you have that handshake request, when you open that door to that kind of invasion of privacy, and you do it for all the right reasons. If you want to try to lower the amount of ghost guns that are out there, so you lower the amount of gun deaths, sure, you're doing it for all the right reasons. But the end result is you opening that legal door so that harmless shit like this gets taken down because of copyright. Because of some giant company deciding that that's what needs to happen. That is the end result of a bill like this that I can see. Again, none of this is mentioned in the bill specifically, but it is Part C of the legislation here, this handshake authentication, that opens the door to that. That frustrates me, that honestly kind of scares me. And again, it's just another thing, another bit of surveillance where your government that has also been responsible for getting rid of your rights to fucking healthcare, trying to invade a fucking other country right now with Greenland, that has been involved in spreading its soft power everywhere around the world because it pretends that it needs to be the world police all the time when there are applications for that. And for some reason, we decide to go for the ones that have the most oil, like in Venezuela. That's the people that you want in your 3D printer telling you whether or not you're allowed to print out a hunk of plastic? Fuck no. Absolutely fuck no. K. Charles Champ says, this is America. If you're not a multi-billion-dollar corp, then you're not seen as a person and don't get a say in the lawmaking. Now, it doesn't help. It does not help that one of the main sources for the information on ghost guns that is being used for this bill just so happens to be Everytown for Gun Safety, which, despite having a far left bias, which I usually don't think is a bad thing, I myself happen to be a pretty far fucking leftist, and I myself happen to be a person that believes that most of the time reality has a left-wing bias. But when I look at the media bias fact check for Everytown, where a lot of this information is coming from, which is the underpinning groundwork for legislation like this that is supposed to be about gun safety and ultimately will end up being an invasion of privacy, I see questionable source. I see the same shit that I would normally see for Fox News, just with a blue instead of a red. And I think we can do better than that. Now, granted, do not hold too much to that particular point, because that is just me doing a very, very brief, like the absolute briefest amount of research. That is not something to hang my hat on specifically. There's nothing major there that could not be explained by early reportings being weird or literally anything. When you're talking about bias and credibility when it comes to media, sometimes you end up getting some weird shit. It just kind of happens. This is the point that I think is a little more salient. This is the point that bothers me a lot more. Even though the information underpinning this can be incorrect, I am worried about that handshake agreement. I do not want my 3D printer having spyware on it that tells daddy US government every single time what I'm fucking 3D printing. They don't need that information. I am sorry. The little bits of plastic that come off of my 3D printer are not their responsibility to handshake as to whether or not I'm doing it the right way. Does that mean we're going to get gun safety laws because of Reagan? Yeah. Jassa says, oh, Michael Bloomberg. Yeah. Sean Helfin says, by the way, don't get upset at Doug Bowser until next year about Wizards of the Coast and Secret Layers. Also, so did you enjoy giving your new Ninja Turtles Commander deck in a series of booster packs? Or in completely different what are you talking about, Sean? That sounded like a whole jumble of words. It just sounded like a huge jumble of words. Gun laws, Black Panther's back. Coincidence? I think not. Sarah Greta says left or right fake news is fake news. True. Oh yeah, I know that they fucked up putting TMNT stuff in the Lorwyn packs. I understand that. Just the verbiage of that. The verbiage of that from Sean was just confusing. It was very, very confusing. K. Charles says, how soon before they do shit like this, turning your lights on and off requires an online handshake? Look, here's the bottom line. We live in a world right now where companies, lobbying groups have their hands and their fingers so steeped into our politicians, so deep into their fucking groins, that it is considered a normal thing that a car might lock the ability to have heated seats behind a paywall. A machine that you buy, that you own, can have a feature that you don't have access to that is within its mechanical capabilities because some dipshit lobbied that should be a thing that we don't fight against. That be a thing that is considered perfectly legal and okay to do so that they can grace the pockets of some politician so that they can send their kid to a slightly better fucking school or buy a better yacht. I do not think that world where you own nothing, but you should be happy about it and pay a subscription service for it, I do not think that world also needs spyware in your fucking 3D printer. We do not need all of these layers of bureaucratic bullshit to have a stable and happy society with people. We simply don't. It's not necessary. At all. Stop says, I want to print my bugs in peace. I don't need the government seeing me print beetles. Exactly. Exactly. Anyway, if you guys appreciated this breakdown, if you think that this was informative in any way, shape, or form, if you find this type of content helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the like button, subscribing, all of those things. Also, let me know what you think about the new setup that I'm working with right now. Same office, same everything, but different lighting, different camera, trying out some new things in terms of aesthetics to see what might work or what might not work in regards to what I'm doing here on the channel. That said, thank you very much for watching. This is one of my hobbies that I am fairly passionate about and I very much enjoy, and I do not want this hobby invaded by a bureaucratic fucking nightmare, personally. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. I will hopefully see y'all in the next one.